Our next speaker is a lawyer, investment advisor, journalist, and educator. He is a partner at Moore, Ingram, Johnson, and Steele, a law firm based in Marietta, Georgia. He practices in many areas, including domestic and international business transactions, mergers and acquisitions, strategic alliances, and private equity. He served as a judicial clerkship to the Honorable Chief Judge Walter E. Hoffman, U.S. District Court, Eastern District of Virginia, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The topic of his talk today is China's structural rebalancing strategies for investment in emerging industries. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Phil Thompson.
Good morning. Seeing as how this panel discussion is about innovation and technology, I'm clearly the only person up here totally unqualified to speak to that. Being a lawyer, lawyers are not great at innovation or technology necessarily, but I'll do my best. To try to give you a background about what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to sort of move through an interdisciplinary view of how technology, the acquisition of technology and the innovation of technology works in today's world. I was going to focus, and my PowerPoint, which is really just a narrative description of the points I wanted to make, has been covered very eloquently, better than I could have by one of the earlier speakers. And so I want to give credit where credit's due to Brian on that. He covered that topic out on FINSA, the Foreign Investment National Security Act, in a very good overview basis. I will make a couple points about that. The Foreign Investment National Security Act, which is really a amendment to prior legislation, was signed into law about 2008 by President Bush. The reason it was signed into law, which Brian already alluded to, was a lot of it was perception among the populace, but more specifically among Congress, that the United States was falling victim to piracy of technology and other things. So this legislation came about, and what it was intended to do was to create an interdisciplinary committee that could screen any investment made by a foreign person in the United States in any type of business activity, really, or technology that was critical to the U.S. security. Now, that was the broad parameters of it. It's been expanded over those years. I will point out to you that there is a study that's mandated by the Act, is published by Congress every year. It's a report which looks back at every single filing that's been made with FINSA during the preceding year. The most recent report, the 2015 report, was just published. It shows data from 2014, I believe, so it's a little dated. And Brian's already commented on this. The things that are important in it as takeaways is that the filings that were made in 2014, and this is also true in 2015, are up significantly, perhaps 50%. Brian also alluded to the fact that China is particularly focused in these filings. I think the statistics are in 2014 that of the filings that were made, which by the way are voluntary, it's not mandated, it's voluntary, I'll come back to that in a moment, 20% of those were filings by Chinese companies, either mainland China or Hong Kong. If you look at the numbers, it's a very vastly disproportionate number of filings that were made by Chinese companies. What's also significant is that, and this is, I'll show some examples, it's on one of the slides in a moment, that just in this calendar year alone, there have been 4 major proposed merger and acquisitions investments that have either been withdrawn or tabled or undone. Another point to make about the Foreign Investment National Security Act is that that interdisciplinary committee can come in after the fact, review a transaction that has already either been contractually agreed to in an M&A context and in a contractual context, or has actually been closed, consummated, and there have been examples of this, and they can undo the transaction, and they can force the parties to break up the transaction. And I can assure you, when you're talking about billion-dollar transactions, upfront due diligence expenses, very esteemed consultants, lawyers, accountants, et cetera, the risk involved in that occurrence is dramatic. What I would say about that is this is a pitch, I should be getting a fee here, is that what a company like that needs to do is hire consulting firms, experts who specialize in dealing with this type of situation. They're generally in DC, who not only know the law, but more importantly, they know the people who are in charge of it. They've dealt with them, and they need to get way out front in these type of transactions. It's not just technical legal issues. It's more about knowing who to deal with. I would say that if you look at the slides, because they were handed out, I don't need to deal with them. The thing that's also interesting about it is, and I'm going to segue into a different piece of U.S. legislation in a second, is that the scope of this focus on national security has broadened dramatically. The most recent example of a transaction is a proposed $46 billion takeover by China National Chemical of a Swiss-based company, Syngenta AG, which is in the business of producing seeds and agricultural products. So you have Chinese company wanting to buy a Swiss company, so where's the rub from the U.S. perspective, and why is FINSA involved in this transaction? Well, what it turns out is Syngenta has large storage facilities and processing facilities, mostly in the Midwest. Congress is concerned that if you have a Chinese company coming in, having access to that, it can somehow create a national security risk for our food supply chain. So, I mean, the broadening of the considerations here is dramatic. Jim McGee, who I met last night, had the pleasure of meeting last night. He and I are contemporaries. I won a contest with him over which one of us was older. But we talked about experiences that we've each had with these type of situations. I'm going to mention two in particular, anecdotally. One of them was when in the, I know you're going to cringe at this, was in the 1980s when I was representing a French holding company that bought a fleet of Falcon jets from Boeing de Havilland, Canadian company, and they bought them expressly to enter into lease transactions with Libya. And so I was in Paris at the time, that's where I was practicing, and so my client said, okay, we think we're going to have to deal with some of the U.S. Administrative arms to get this transaction approved. And what turned out to be about a 2-year process, the transaction was not permitted for a number of reasons by Department of Defense because of the avionic parts that were in the jets that they were concerned about that would be broken down and used for military purposes, and so this entire investment by this French company was basically set aside. There are other legislation out there in the U.S. that in addition to FINSA, there's a statute, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which many of you, there's no reason why you would be aware of it because you're not involved in foreign corrupt practices, but these panelists all are very aware of it. Although I'm surprised, I've been a speaker at another competitive business school, not as esteemed as Cole's, over the last 3 or 4 years on supply chain management, systemic risk in supply chain management. And at this convention, it was all the top companies in the U.S., like these companies here. And at the end of each presentation, I said, I'd like to see a show of hands. Who here knows what the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act was. Now, the audience were basically mid-management people in charge of sales and setting up the supply chains. No one in the room had even heard of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which I was more than surprised at, because whether it's Walmart in Mexico or any other number of examples, the risk components of dealing with global multinational companies and dealing abroad are vast. I will say that reading up for this, there's a foreign affairs article which I recommend to everybody in the current edition about China and their global strategy. It's called Made in China 2025. China apparently has 5-year business plans that they enter into, notwithstanding what George Welsh used to say about 5-year business plans, but they're in their 13th. And apparently the impetus behind their newest plan is a strategic acquisition of companies that have high-end technology that they can acquire and, for obvious reasons, assimilate, reverse engineer, use your imagination, anything you can. And the reason for that, which I didn't understand, is that although China's economy is vast, their foreign reserve funds are vast, $3 trillion, what they have been succeeding in is low-end technology and basic staple goods. What they're trying to do now is go upscale. They're trying to go upstream, compete with the IBMs of the world, try to do high-end technology, capital goods, which they've not succeeded in. And one of the ways that they have decided to do this is through acquisitions. If you read the latest FINSA report, the U.S. intelligence agency comes out in that report and says, we have concluded that China has a strategic objective of acquiring U.S. businesses in high-end technology. It's not for market-driven purposes, it's for strategic purposes. This is another reason why Brian's going to be busy, because you're going to have, if you look at the number of acquisitions that are targeted, there is this perception, maybe reality, that there's something driving this that's more than market-driven economics. My last anecdotal situation, I was hired, I do a lot of corporate governance work. I've been hired to do white papers for both public and private companies. About 3-4 years ago, I was hired by a private company that is one of the largest arms manufacturers in the United States. They're actually headquartered in the Southeast. And I was hired to come in and do 2 things. I was hired to do an analysis of their corporate governance structure and to give a 2.5-day educational program on the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act to this arms manufacturer. The people in attendance were everything from the C-suite to the general counsel's office, but more interestingly, it was all their regional salespeople. And so I waded into this 2-day grouping of these different people to find out that never the twain shall meet, that the objectives of the sales force and what they were doing as far as marketing abroad, what the general counsel's office was trying to do properly, which was to educate mid-management and upper management on the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and God forbid the C-suite, none of them were talking off the same piece of paper. And I will tell you that that company, I'm not involved representing them in this, is now under investigation for corrupt practices, if you will, in the way they've been dealing with the sales of their arms into various parts of the world. I guess what I'm trying to suggest here is that in the world of innovation and technology, you have to, there is a fabric there that you have to be educated about. The big players know everything about it, and they have tremendous resources and they spend tremendous time on it, but this is not going to get lesser, it's going to get greater. And it's a very interesting interdisciplinary background. I urge each of you, if you have situations, to reach out to your general counsel or your advisors who are knowledgeable in this area, because all of this requires much greater due diligence and sort of a global knowledge, if you will, of the legislation that's involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. Our next speaker is President and Head of Americas of Infosys, a multinational corporation that provides business consulting, information technology, research, development, software engineering, and outsourcing services. It is headquartered in Bangalore, Karnataka. Our guest runs a portfolio P&L of approximately $2.5 billion globally, helping over 200 clients embrace digital technologies. He is often quoted in publications like Forbes, Business Week, CGT, Stores, etc. He regularly speaks at industry forums like Consumer Goods Technology, NRF, Oracle, Open World, and SAUPO. He holds an MBA in Electronics and Engineering degree. He is a resident of Kennesaw, Georgia, right next to Kennesaw State University, and is on the board of Hands On Atlanta, a nonprofit volunteer network organization focused on education, environment, and economic recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Sandeep Dadlani.
It's like coming home. I speak at several conferences, but when I come back to McGee's conference, this is the Kennesaw State University conference, which is in Kennesaw. So 3 cheers for Kennesaw. Thank you, May, for inviting me here. So I represent Infosys. It's about a $10 billion company. Actually, that doesn't sound impressive. It's a 1 trillion yen company. That's David taught me today how to say this. 1 trillion yen. Our market cap is 5 trillion yens. I paid 500 yens for my Starbucks today. That sounds much better. Starbucks is expensive anyways. So while we've had phenomenal growth in Infosys over the last 35 years, we've gone from 0 to 200,000 people, $10 billion, and it's been a good story. What I would like to share today is perhaps what we have gone through in the last 18 months, something phenomenal. Well, you know, there are these new technology trends that we are all worried about. The supercapacitor graphene charger. Will that charge my phone in a second, you said?
Split second.
Split second. My phone is dying, sir. Can you please help it? But the robots, IBM Watson winning Jeopardy. There is a AI robot that actually mastered the Go strategy game, which is a very, very difficult game. It's much more difficult than chess. And an AI computer defeated the master, the human computer there, the human person there. That is scary. While we are technology companies at a human level, at a personal level, I worry about my kids, right? What are they growing up to? Are they going to be ordered around by a robot? Because that's where we're going. Is this a technology revolution? Or is this a human revolution? Where are we going here? Oh, thank you. You can clap. So that's scary. But then I ask my friends, with all this supercapacitor graphene, I love using that word, supercapacitor graphene charger coming up, how many of you, show of hands, honest show of hands, how many of you are really, really happy with your home Wi-Fi network? There's one guy there, and he doesn't use Comcast. Look at this duality here. We are thinking about the most advanced robots and artificial intelligence machines ever created by this planet. Things that are dangerous, almost might take over the world and be our overlords for whether we are in Asia or the US, doesn't matter. At the same time, our home Wi-Fi network, a basic Wi-Fi network, doesn't work. This is the duality that all of us face as individuals and as companies. There is an existing legacy infrastructure, there is a legacy skill set, there is someone who's already you as a person as well, and then there is a new. the new things that you want to evolve to, the new technologies that you want to adopt, the new, super graphene, despite my cell phone dying there is the old and the new. And this duality is perhaps the most difficult to deal with for companies in Asia and companies in the US. So we at Infosys came out with a simple strategy. We said, hey, this duality applies to us. As Infosys, it applies to all our clients. And so we should look at renewing the old or renewing the existing and building the new, both at the same time. Innovation sounds sexy, building the new sounds sexy, but doing both together is perhaps the only way to sustainably take the entire planet forward. The entire planet forward. By the way, today is Earth Day. How many of you knew that? Earth Day, there you go. So Infosys has made a commitment, by the way, on Earth Day that we will be 100% carbon neutral by 2018 in 2 years, which is pretty big for a company our size. That's a small plug for Earth Day. Coming back to renew and new, our clients are beginning to ask strange questions. You see, first they used to ask, sir, where is your innovation department? And we used to say, hey, those 10 people are our innovation department. Those 100 people, we feed them under the door. That's our innovation department. Everybody else is, we are just, we just come to our work and go away and so on. And that's wrong. That's fundamentally wrong. A company of 200,000 people, think of yourself, in your companies, your universities, which is your R&D department and innovation department. What about the rest? Are you not innovators? Are you just, robots? So we decided to launch a program called Zero Distance. We came up and said, each one of you, 200,000 people, the average age is 27, by the way, each one of you is an innovator. Whatever you do today, whatever monotonous, regular coding job that you do today, you are an innovator. Now prove it. If you are an innovator, you will prove it publicly. You will either be close to your code, so close that you will write the best code of your life, or you will be close to your customer, so close that you will be able to innovate with your customer at a customer intimacy level, or then you're close to business value. You're structuring programs and business value better than anybody else. And we launched this, and we put it on our social network, which was Yammer, and we waited, and nothing happened. And then on June 20th, I woke up and opened my Yammer feed, and I found one project manager from Trivandrum. Trivandrum is a coastal city in India. Out of 200,000 people, this 25-year-old project manager had woken up and written a story. He said, hey, my client is one of the world's largest retailers. My project was to code an interface between the merchandising system and the point-of-sale system for the retailer. I was coding the interface. This interface helped pass on pricing for jewelry. Jewelry, everybody understands jewelry. Pricing for jewelry from the merchandisers to the store. I could see that they were passing on discounts, like a 30% discount to all the stores for all jewelry at once during a particular season. I went and asked them, why are you passing on the same discount to all stores in all the season? And they said, well, because the system allows it that way. Maybe it was a mainframe, maybe it was something very hard-coded there, that the system just allows a discount to be set for all the stores, for all the categories. The one thing that I always think about is about this Chinese restaurant that hired robots to serve food. I don't know if you've read about that. So this Chinese restaurant sacked all its workers and hired robots, $7,000 robots to actually serve food to everybody. They said, well, it's far more accurate, and they make less mistakes, and they take orders better, and so on. And about a week back, they sacked all the robots because they were spilling soup all over. They just didn't know how to handle Chinese soup, which I thought was very, very interesting. As I look to our children, what will be important for the future is not just the ability to solve problems. You see, all of us have grown up mostly in engineering, sciences, etc., where we solve problems. Give us a problem, we'll solve it. But the future is about finding the right problem. What is the right problem to find? There's a big chocolate company in the US which came to me and said, I have a problem. You see, chocolates are at the checkout lane of a retailer, And 25% of our sales are impulse buys. People are waiting in the checkout lane, and your 10-year-old, or sometimes you, are just grabbing that chocolate off that checkout lane. Well, checkout lanes are going away because of self-checkout. That's 25% of our sales. Can you solve that? I don't know. I don't have 10 case studies to solve that. We have to find the right problem to solve together. One of the techniques we use very avidly in this whole setup is design thinking. These are new skills. Design thinking is a technique to help find the right problem to solve. That then will allow us to use artificial intelligence or big data or any other technical capability to make much more advancements than ever before. So renew and new is our goal, our strategy, and that perhaps will help these technologies amplify human potential instead of replacing us. Thank you very much.